Hey everybody. So today we have an exciting thing that we'll be going over. We'll be looking at OpenRouter's OAuth and how you can actually incorporate OpenRouter as an OAuth into your app so that your users can start having access to all of the AI models that OpenRouter provides. It's a great way to incorporate tons of AI models into your applications and provide more flexibility to the user as they start testing out prompts and start trying to build with your application. So without further ado, let's dive into the code and see how we can actually integrate this so that you can start reaping the benefits of all of these AI models. Awesome. So to get started, we'll navigate to this GitHub repository. And what we'll do is we're going to clone this GitHub repo so that we can start developing. And to do that, we'll just open up our terminal and start developing from there. Awesome. So now that I'm here at my terminal, I'm going to just quickly look and get the repository URL, and I'm just going to clone this repo because it's going to make building with OAuth a lot easier with OpenRouter because it's just an out-of-the-box Next.js repo that you can use with a front end and back end all integrated. So I'm actually going to clone this repository. We're going to do git clone, and I'm doing this inside my documents repo or documents folder. And then we're actually going to go into that repo, which I believe we would be typing in this to do so. And then once we have that, we'll just open up the code in our code editor of choice. I'm using VS Code, and sweet. So now we have all of the necessary front end and back end integrated that we can actually start to look at and see what's happening behind the scenes to make this all run. So if I dive just simply to the actual page where everything is integrated. Oh, and super important, run npm install once you do this. So we will run npm install. That way all of our packages are working. Sweet. And then that should all be fixed. Cool. So this is where we'll start because it basically explains how the front end interface runs and how we integrated OpenRouter's OAuth in case you have any questions around the code. So the first thing we'll be doing is importing all our necessary imports that we need to run the application. And then we'll start to add, or here as we have all of our states that we need in order to make this run. So we will be having an API key that we'll be receiving from OpenRouter after the OAuth happens. We will have messages that we'll send, which will show you once you actually log in, how do you actually start using the models and start to get completions from them. We've also incorporated that into this GitHub repo. We take all of the models that OpenRouter has and make them available for users to actually use and use any model they want so that they can do testing. We take the selected model ID so that we can pass that into our backend so that it can actually, or pass that into our API route so it can call the correct model, the input text that we are using, and then just a simple item to manage loading status so that it's easy for people to actually understand what's going on. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to the application so that we can see what is going on. So I will do this, and if I open it here, we should be able, and I'll just X out of this. Cool. So now if I go to localhost 3001, we have our application running here, and we'll get to see what's happening. So to actually log in, what we did is we provided a login button that's pretty seamless, and what we do with the use effect is once the application runs is we check to see if there is an actual API key. In lieu of us having a backend right now, we're just storing this to local storage. Highly recommend in a working application, you store this in a proper backend where it's safe and other people can't see the data like you can here. So what we'll first do is we're going to run a function in use effect to see if we have if the path we're on right now has the code parameter, which actually in the URL, which is what's returned from us from OpenRouter. And we'll show you how that works as we log in. So we're calling this route in our folder, which is right here. And essentially, this is what will be actually getting the API token for us from OpenRouter so that we can automatically log in and have the user start using all the models. So this is all the code to do that, and we'll dive into the actual API call of this here in a second. And then the other item we're doing is once we're logged in, if we're logged in, we're just fetching all the models so that we can store that in our models variable so that it's easy for people to use these models. So this, without, getting too much into the details, let's actually see the code where we are looking at logging in with OpenRouter's OAuth. So this is the code that's relevant to us. So we'll see this all relates to this right here. So we're going to be using OpenRouter's OAuth to get instant access to all of OpenRouter's models with a quick login. And basically, when the user clicks on this button, it's going to call the OpenRouter auth, which is right here. And essentially, this opens up the window for us. And since we're on localhost 3001, I'm going to change this to localhost 3001. And what ends up happening, I end up clicking on this, and let me just refresh this to make sure it's okay. So, and it takes callback URL. I'm already logged in, and I already have an OpenRouter account. If you don't have an OpenRouter account, this will be where it prompts the users to create an OpenRouter account, and then it tells them an app is basically requesting to use your models. So what will end up happening is you're going to put a max credit limit. Here I'm going to put 2 as my credit limit. And then what ends up happening is when I click authorize, is it will send basically a code back to my model or to my website that I would then process and use in order to actually create the API key I need for my user to actually start using all these models. So what we see here is we have this code now. And this is what we really need to create the OpenRouter OAuth, to create the API key, actually. So if we see that code is returned to us, and going back to our use effect, we can see that here we are looking for certain parameters in our URL, and this code is what we're looking for because it returns to us this specific code that OpenRouter gives us so that we can create the actual URL of so that we can actually create the API key that our user will be using. So now we can actually look at, okay, it calls the API OAuth route, and then it tells us, pass in this code, and then we can start doing some magic to create what we need. So let's dive into the actual API call here. If we see that we're passing in that code, and if there is a code, we basically find this from parsing through our JSON body. If there is a code, call this route from OpenRouter. And we got this from the OpenRouter docs that you can see here. If you see right here, it basically walks you through step by step what we're going through, but also gives you the code on how to do this. I've just translated this into a more holistic app so that it's easier for you to build with. So we will be getting that API key through calling this call right here. And we will be passing in our code. And what ends up happening is what's returned is an actual API key that we then store, which we are storing in local storage. So once I pass this code in, what it does is it spits me out a API key. And you can also console log this to see what the API key is. And then I store this API key in my local session. So if I open up my console, then I look at my, where is it? Okay, application, look at localhost storage, I can see my API key right here stored. So it was created, ready to use, and now we can actually start using the models that OpenRouter has. And the way that we do that is built in here, is essentially we check if there is an API key, return this component, which shows all of the models that a user can use with OpenRouter. So this is super sweet because basically with just a simple API, OpenRouter made this so easy where it's just a simple callback to the application you have, and then setting that up to get the user's API key and storing that makes it possible that this user can now start using all of the models that OpenRouter is constantly sending in and updating and providing to users so that they can have the most customizable and flexible experience. So now if I go here, I have the models I want to use. I can pass in the text for my purposes. I can, I don't really know. Let's use this Mistral instruct. So I'm going to just ask a simple question of what is the capital of Texas? And then it will start loading up response. And obviously we can see it responded Houston, Texas, which is not the capital of Texas. So I can now maybe start testing out other models, which is great for you to see, like which models might perform better or well. The capital of Texas is Austin. That's fire. So I can see right off the bat that this one might be a bit more accurate than the other one. And if I look at how this is all working behind the scenes, I have all of my input text that I'm sharing to store the variables of. And then I essentially pass this into this get completion response function. And this calls another API in my route. And I need to see something real quick. Okay, sweet. So I have my API key here. And then basically what I'm going to be doing is I'll be passing in the OpenRouter API key that I have from local storage, the model that I'm selecting, and the user message, which is just that text. And then when I have that, I'll call this route to actually start getting the response I need back. And if you see here, I have my API key, I have the model that I'm using. And then what I'll end up doing is I built it out this way. If you wondered why it responds like it's a Gen Z, I just customized the system to essentially your helpful assistant that only responds in Gen C slag, like no cap, and that's fire. And basically it's just a fun play on how I think this, some fun, it's a modern AI. So that's how we're doing that. And then we pass in the user message and it returns the response to us. So now I can quickly get that response and show it to the user. And then off of this, you can build in tons of cool interfaces that other users can use. There's tons of chat UIs you can build, tons of customer service UIs, just all of these models that the users can start playing around and testing with that is super beneficial for your dev experience. So let's just try another model and see how that goes. Sweet. So it seems like almost all of them work with the capital of Texas, except right here. And oh, there we go. Second time is a try. So with all that, this is how you would incorporate OpenRouter's OAuth into your application and how you can actually use that OAuth to quickly start incorporating the completions API into this so that you can actually get all of the models access and start testing out models. And this is a good base layer for you to build off future applications using this. Also, if you just want to log out, what it does, you can click log out. It clears the entire API keys and then helps you start, logging back in and building again. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to use OpenRouter's OAuth. Again, if you like what you see, please like, subscribe, and as always, hope you guys have a blessed day and talk to you all soon. Ciao.